Occasionally, a piece of media just kind of stabs you in the heart. I'm sure everybody has that list of games, shows, books. As important as water, things held very close. And usually it starts with Sonic Adventure 2. Very occasionally, work is taste making. There's something about this thing at this time in this you that revolutionizes your understanding of the medium world itself all at once before you can catch it. Brilliant Flash reminding you of the importance of stories, the power of media, the meaning of art. It doesn't have to be good or popular or even sane. Like Sonic Adventure 2. It's luck and happenstance that this finds its way into your hands. It's the universe asking you to listen to a whisper of God embodied in creativity, higher aspirations demanding attention. We're thrown from the void into a meat prison that dies, and sometimes it gets lucky. An excellent meal, a brilliant movie, an astonishing game blessing our souls for moments fleeting. Occasionally, you're browsing Steam, search by the RPG tag, just on the second page is black and white thumbnail. It catches your eye and think, fuck it, see, this ain't good. It just so happens to be Stars in Time. Here's a simple version. It's really good, go play it. I know I never go off and play the game when asked, but if you care about games as art, or if you create yourself, or you have $20 in a weekend, go play this fucking game. Otherwise, full spoilers. I will never figure out to make good audio. Fuck it, we ball. ISAT is a story-biased game. In the pantheon of game design, story and mechanics are both equally important. No matter how fun a game could be, horrific writing will disillusion a player before they can get there. Same for a great story. Medium remains message. However, nothing can be both, and any given work will have to choose which basket gets the majority of the eggs. A VN is typically 90-10, with interaction being mostly minimal. JRPGs and those inspired by JRPGs are more like 70-30. Gameplay is present, mechanics have depth and are engaging, but narrative is what you're here for. Characters, world-building themes, all the shit 8th grade book reports are. While I retell the game's story at you, let's evaluate it in those terms. How does the game accomplish this rubric in good writing checkmarks? Adrian Vizier bears mention. This is a near solo project, with almost everything done by this one person. He did a handful of interviews following the release of ISAT, and I thought I'd get more mileage out of these. I'd assume that they get enough weird behavior day to day, but Vizier is a living example, genuinely aspirational. They took the advice every amateur creative hears and did it and succeeded. If you want to talk about being a queer artist, that's Vizier. They're also an absolute goblin, and I love them.
That fucking sucks, and that angers me, and oh my god, I want to tear it into pieces, and that's really good art.
In Stars in Time is structured into 6 acts, that advance with key story beats and then change what is doable across the game. Prologue is Act 1, the epilogue is Act 6. Act 1 takes about 2 hours, 5 minutes for speedrunners. There's plenty of gameplay stuff. Far more subtle and important is your introduction to this world and its characters. You play as a friend waking from a nap. Your ally, Mirabelle, is prattling about some sleepover in a clock tower and Sif's poor memory and some shit they gotta go do. Player is then free to wander the town of Dormont and chat at the party. Talk to Bonnie, and the first thing you'll realize is that they have some nebulous problem with Sif. He can't figure it out, and they aren't saying. Odile is the oldest in the group and certainly carry a bit of wisdom, but refuse to disclose why they're actually here, settling to tolerate this blankology gag that was never funny to begin with. When you visit the Change God statue, the exposition makes clear the real main character is Mirabelle. It's her town that was attacked. She was the sole escapee. She met the fighter, the researcher, the traveler, the kid that now make up the party. She's the one blessed by God themselves to defeat the big bad, being the king, a tyrant, freezing Bogard in time. Once a friend talks to Isabu, it is immediately apparent they have the most crush on each other, as if it's not that funny. The last thing on the list being to ask a favor. Favor tree? Of course. Everybody has one of those. This isn't a ritual Sif is familiar with, so they find a leaf and wish for something small. The universe is a little busy with the country being destroyed, and just move on. With about 40 to 60 minutes of gameplay, it's good to stop and track the way that information is given and expanded. This was never about a sleepover. They always sleep in the same place. They've been traveling together for months. Sif never needed to go tell everyone. They were already meeting at the clock tower. This was an excuse. For Mira, it's a distraction from the fact that if they fuck up, the world ends tomorrow. For Safrin, it's the last opportunity to wander around and hang out. At the clock tower, Bonnie cooks for them and they spend time together. Like always. Like real estate, it's characterization, characterization, characterization. There's no wasted space. Bonnie is loud and snide, Odile coy and clever, Mira anxious and kind, Isa boisterous and smart. Through character motive, we can get done all the exposition and establishing we need to. We know how we got here, we understand the stakes, we know what we need to do. It's a massive info dump, but it's filtered through the lens of characters. It's efficient. More importantly, it's relevant. Tomorrow you will journey through the house and punch the king in the face, and then the journey will end. The story is proposing itself as the ending of a standard JRPG. It's the final Dragon Path Tensei Persona fantasy quest. Obviously, it takes for granted a series of tropes that the player can find comfort in. One combat tutorial later, it's fine. The sense of comfort is ripped out from underneath you. Big Rock makes a Heathe pancake, and Sif wakes back up in the field. It's Groundhog Day, starting here and ending whenever Sif dies. Groundhog Day. Here is where I would like to stop retelling the story. I hate doing it. If you want someone to tell you a good story, go play the video game. In doing analysis, it's a necessary evil, not worthwhile in its own right. I'll bring things up as they're relevant to my points, which comes from the needed caveat that I'm trimming a lot of fat. There's so much goddamn stuff in this game. I love SusQuest, but I don't have a reason to talk about it. I would give anything to talk about the tarot cards in the floor 1 closet, or mention how the broken doll makes it out, entire mechanics and quests like souvenirs and fish. I just don't have a lot to say about. Despite the microscopic scale of the game itself, 1 dungeon and 1 town is very little for 20 plus hours of gameplay. The writing accomplishes the sheer expansiveness equivalent to an open world game. It's cultural and nuanced such that it creates a chasm of so much fucking shit in this goddamn game. This becomes clear throughout Act 2. As you explore the house, a world is built around you. Now, you're ingraining the space itself into your muscles, while the interactables and conversations imply something greater. Boletaria, Mudu, some island to the north. Vani comes from a coastal village, a part of Vaugarde, Issa from a much larger city, and Odile from Kaboo. Player is trapped in a tiny little box, and yet languages, cultures, religions are all there. When Bonnie offers snacks, they're cookies, onigiri, samosas, malanga fritters, real dishes that come from all across the world. Food is deeply cultural, tied to places, climate, and resources, and imperialism. Here, it's a shorthand to create that same feeling of eating something delicious and wondering what the hell a malanga is. The change belief is monotheistic, but Odile fails to properly describe the gods of her country's belief. The language itself is lacking in detailing what an expression is. Friends' belief are neither of these things. Who knows about Mudu or Boletaria? The magic of this world is called craft. Protector, creative, piercing make up the literal rock, paper, scissors of the combat system. These dancing statuettes of the Change God are everywhere. Issa mentions he imbued craft into Sif's eye patch so that it would always be comfortable. Apparently bodycraft is just a thing you can do. The obsessive attention to detail becomes immaculate world building. It's a lot of gesturing at stuff that isn't necessarily relevant or important to the narrative. A lot of it is, and a lot of it isn't. Mudu's sole purpose in the narrative book is from there, in a side quest. In Act 3. Not everything needs purpose when the process is naturalistic and player-driven. It's typically Odile or Sifrin asking about these things, or it's a book on a table and you're the one choosing to read it. When that sparks a conversation illuminating some minor detail, it feels engaging. Act 2 is mostly this. The writing is either characterizing or world building with a few side quests. Plot goal is to beat the king hiding on floor 3 and you're busy getting your ass kicked on floor 1. The mechanical side of this is exploration, combat, and a little bit of puzzle solving. We'll worry more about gameplay later. What's relevant is how the player interacts with the house as a space. There are 3 floors, each of which involves getting keys, opening doors, mini-boss, snack room. In any other game, it would be an incredibly lackluster dungeon. It's a straight line with branches on the side. Fuck you, Sea of Stars. But it has dead ends, soft locks forcing you to go back and side with the Beauty Alliance. These word lock doors with passphrases back in Dormont are on floor 3. The secret library, the hidden passage, the star room. These take that boring straight line shit and make it into the appraised puzzle box. Ultimately, all the fun will drain from your body. You're forced again and again to do it all again and again. You'll memorize every room, interactable, enemy location out of necessity and convenience. By the end of Act 2, it has baked itself into muscle memory. Real quick, there's 3 remaining characters to talk about. By now, I'm sure some are screaming about how I haven't mentioned Loop yet. Some probably get why they're difficult to talk about generally, but I genuinely don't have that much to say about them. This oddly anatomical star person crawls out of the favor tree at the beginning of Act 2. They are 1-part tutorial character. They're here to tell players what buttons to push and keep them from getting stuck. Otherwise, they're the only person Sif can talk to. Loop's memory also doesn't reset, and they seemingly know everything but also don't. Loop has the apathetic malevolence character of people who think Nietzsche is cool, despite never reading him. For the king, the 2 most notable things about him are the first things you see. His bald fists cover his face. He takes note of Sifrin and asks, "Do you remember?" The answer being, "What?" And then he kills you. He knows something, but he hides it. Once you get around the one-hit kill move, there's more dialogue during the fight. He wants to preserve the pristine and perfect country, he's afraid of losing it, and offers that this moment of defeating him is the best they'll ever get. The party calls this dumb as shit and punches him. By stating his motives, it makes the conflict more. Something frozen is unchanging, goes against change. The king constantly obfuscates everything. He's very sad, and there's a problem. Head housemaiden Euphorese is a character. She has 3 monologues, and that's basically all of her dialogue. However, folks love her. I love her. She seems really nice, and says some of the more famous lines in the game. Something's broken, something's failing, rotting. Speaking to Euphorese is the end of the journey, but not the end of the game. In that, we see the power of poetry and prose. Prose, your rice and potatoes, creating a foundation for the poetry to sauce to garnish the dish of any text. That metaphor being poetry, the use of rhetorical devices in order to convey a point, create imagery, etc. This being prose, the basic construction of my sentences. Here used to justify that I am the one games writer allowed to use food metaphors because I also cook. I fucking love rhetoric. The word is more commonly used to describe strategies of argument, like the Gish Gallop, and less so devices like alliteration. Here we're more concerned with ethos, pathos, tricolons, asyndeton, and, of course, the climax. Something's broken, something's failing, rotting. It's a fantastic piece of rhetoric. This line is everywhere in fanworks and comment sections because it's really good. King's dialogue in particular is almost pure rhetoric. When pressured, he can only speak in verse. He details indescribable grief, yet remains behind implication. The prose are incredibly grounded. They're familiar in part because they're so anachronistic. Party talks like my real-life friends, which I totally have. Many of them. There's a mechanical side to this as well. Games are, it's going to shock you, interactive. Text-heavy games tend to have a lot of pressing the confirm button to scroll text every couple of sentences, in fact. If the writing's bad, you just mash your way through. However, Adrian has applied a technique seen far too rarely. The text scrolling will pause and break while drawing itself. Every comma enforces a small pause while an ellipsis will crawl or sprint out of your control. The text is formatted, closer to a script being read than words on a screen. Using this, different characters can say things differently. This is a rhetorical practice unique to the medium itself. Books don't have screens, anything voiced will be formatted by actors or editors. My closest comparison is Junji Ito's use of the page turn in manga, toying with the size of panels to create a lead-in that readers then have to physically reveal themselves. When you're forced to push a button in the middle of a text box you're currently reading, it drags you that little bit closer. To engage, you have to pay attention. You have to keep reading because you want to see what's next. It's viscerally powerful in a way players don't necessarily notice. The sequence of events here is brilliant. By now, you've made the house your home. You've learned everything it has to teach you, you have walked every path, eaten every snack, dodged fate itself, and killed the monster. You're given that serenity, picturesque and warm as the walk above the clouds. They get to go back now. Issei can go home, Molly to their sister, Mira to stay at the house, Odile to Kaboo or wherever else. Sif can... Whoever did this, change of the universe, whatever did this, it worked. Oh no. Something's broken, something's failing, rotting. That's why that line is so famous. But it's not calming down just yet. We see the first major Sifrin breakdown, which Mira walks into, and we see the first Sifrin blatantly lying to avoid vulnerability, and then they talk to Loop, and the plot threads that make up the rest of the narrative are set up. There's so much going on, like this is peak for the writing. We build towards this devastating moment, which becomes an avalanche of laugh crying. These plot threads follow up on stuff in Act 2, reshift the focus and onto this unraveling mystery that we slowly follow to the end. But we'll get there. One of those threads becomes, how do I help my allies? Because Mira sees Sif freaking out, and through his attempt to play it off, she offers to, talk about it? Something's going on, so maybe they could talk? Sifrin's brain bad makes them fail to understand this is a genuine request. They're so closed off, so used to devaluing their need, incapable of healthily expressing emotion, that they convince themselves this is some type of clever trick. That really, Mira's asking for his help. This is a seamlessly executed non sequitur. It's nonsense. Sif's just being dumb, and their conclusion becomes an obsession that takes a few hours from the player, but it drags the player with them. In my first 2 playthroughs, I never questioned it. It's not logical, but the emotion works. This process involves asking them, finding some information in the house, and then using that to help. This process of cross-referencing information is the gameplay of Act 3 and 4. It's a lot more engaging than I'm making it sound, but We'll get there. Odile's looking for a book, you find where it is in the secret library. Mira's mulling over some papers, you find where they are in her room. Bonnie deflects by saying Sif doesn't know their favorite foods, all three are mentioned in snack room conversations. Issa wants you to help everyone else first. We will get there. First, I would like to discuss the presence of queerness in a text. This comes in two forms. Textual queerness, like having a gay character, or subtextual queerness, like found family. I'm just excited about this as you are. The Owl House is a perfect example of both.
Foolish child!
Season 1, Episode 1 very thoroughly establishes a few themes. Protagonist Luz is getting sent to summer camp for being weird and unruly before an owl steals her cool witch book. She follows it to a magic door, entering the demon realm, where she meets Ida and her weird dog thing, King. I don't understand why my brain does those fucking syllables like that. Like, how do you even make vowels? Ida and her weird dog thing, King. Her weird dog thing, King. Ida then goats Luz into pulling a heist from the Conformatorium, where the tyrannical emperor imprisons unruly weirdos, like the author insert. Just in case you missed it, it's called the Conformatorium. Luz feels misunderstood by her mom. She's rejected by polite society. They attempt to conform her to the status quo. However, she meets an older woman who has been through this all the same. Luz is bolstered in her gut instinct that being normal is bullshit.
They just want to be themselves. Why does everyone think that being a weirdo is so bad?
She chooses to stay and become a witch. Ida's older, she's established in the world, she's rejected conformity, and from there found her way along the edge. By sacrificing normality and acceptance, it gives her power. Here, that's literalized through the magic system.
You've always looked down on me because I'm wild, but fortunately, that just made me work harder than you.
They both have troubled relationships with biological family.
Lily?
Adolin?
Through Ida, Luz comes to understand herself enough to bridge the gap with her mother. Through Luz, Ida is forced to conflict with her sister and grow into a maternal role to care for her.
Rock, maternal gesture.
This is all subtextual queerness. Conformatorium's a bit on the nose, but still. Rejecting conformity, embracing individuality, creating found family, having to redefine blood relations, themes and narratives that reflect lived queer experience. Luz also meets Amity. Amity puts a lot of effort into pretending not to like the human a little bit.
So you two go to the same school now. That doesn't change anything.
And Luz doesn't really get what to do about it, but it slowly develops into friendship and confession and the first ever gay kiss in a Disney animated property. 2022. Textual queerness, boy kissers, NBs, queer folk being gay and shit. In season 3, there's an I'm bi scene just in case. I'm stacking the deck here, but these definitions are useful. Texts like the Owl House are seminal queer works. They're irrevocably and essentially queer. Queer people living queer experience and queer stories. Also, it's really good. Like, it's meant for a tween-to-teen audience. Again, Formatorium, strong storytelling, wonderful animation. It's amazing to think tweens and teens get to have stories like this. However, Disney is evil and fucked over Dana Terrace and her team, so find some mysterious way to watch it without giving them your money. When we look at it this way, most RPGs are pretty gay. The party is always a collection of weirdos and rejects who find kinship and solidarity in each other, exploring the edges of society and reality, which grants them the immense power needed to save the world from oppressive tyranny. Even the bad ones. Fuck you, Sea of Stars. Fuck Octopath Traveler 2. That game's writing is so boring. It's so fucking boring. And Stars in Time is also seminally queer. Odile and Ida are the same archetype, so are Luz and Bonnie. The difference is in the details. Odile's reserved, where Ida is a goofball, Luz is a protagonist, where Bonnie is a supporting character. But we see both excel at their chosen passions. Helping your allies is where all of this surfaces. Thematically, it's acceptance, identity, connection. The underlying trauma of their lives is surface, shared, and embraced in these intricately woven moments that could have been cut from late-night couch conversations. You watch Bonnie spin their wheels, somehow Sif losing his eye is their fault. Mira pursues change with dogmatic demand. Some parts aren't going to change. It's through someone who doesn't want to. Is she able to accept that not changing is different? Only two outsiders can understand what that means. To lose where you come from and not know where you are. Issa's fragmented self is poured like wine under starlight, this romantic connection furthering. When you do all of this and run through the house, it affects a variety of scenes and interactables. More than I can note here, but all three snack rooms change drastically. In the third, Sif gets upset about how Odile doesn't consider them friends. They're allies brought together by convenience and necessity. But that's not true. It wouldn't be this if it was, and Odile knows that. She's old enough to get that this is more than circumstance and friendship. This is familial. They're not friends, they're family. They've chosen to stuck together. This is a massive character growth moment for Sif. He struggles with emotional intimacy. Every instance of ally changes to family member. Like, it's a big deal. I'm understating just how good this is. The family scenes are the storytelling at its absolute best. We either skim or we're here for half an hour. I wrote that version and I didn't like it. Textually, we get some queer identities. Isabu is a trans man. He went through this process of change, both the physical body crafting and personal. He became who he needed to be to protect and kill that child self, but feeling dissatisfied in it. He puts on a bro facade, but it's obvious just how intelligent he is from the start. I really enjoy this embodied trans experience. Because your gender is all over the place, your personality is too. You swing in whichever direction seems right in the moment, and it sacrifices who you want to be. For Issa, this is like a vague sense of ego protection. This ignores bigotry. It's not uncommon for fantasy queer works to presuppose a world that unilaterally accepts queer identities. The Owl House does this as well. It becomes problematic when it whitewashes our lived experience. Near the end of the series, we see Marcia, a femme presenting envy, working as a receptionist in a museum in a small town in a southern state. They got the fucking pronouns on the desk, but that's the most unrealistic part of the story. Fucking titans and magic, some dude is 600 years old, whatever. But human decency for genderqueers, that's not real. My set also presupposes the same. Body crafting is integrated into society as a good thing. Gay relationships and NBs are banal, barely needing acknowledgement. So it's really fascinating that ace folks don't get the same. Mira's conflict is that she believes everyone and her god want a certain type of change from her. The type of change that comes from romantic and sexually intimate relationships. But she thinks of doing things and spending their lives together, and it's freaking gross. This one scene shows Mira as Arrow Ace and Sif as Aloe Ace. Like our real shitty world, aspec is a queer identity typically ignored even within queer spaces. Mira can't point to some piece of culture to explain herself like Issa can. While I like the gender stuff, the ace rep is more important. Ace folks face bigotry in group. Ace folks The way I made this point originally, nobody needs a reminder of how bad things are. So instead what I'll say is just like, these people matter. There's 3 content creators I can think of that I watch who are ace themselves, and I'll go ahead and leave links to them. And then my actual call to action here will be to listen to ace voices. You have a responsibility to educate yourself on the issues at hand so that you can be better to the people around you. Before we move on, doing all the family scenes and completing a family run accomplishes nothing. Apparently this didn't fix, redirect, or clean whatever Euphorese is talking about. This change is purely internal for Sif. There's an achievement for doing this 3 times. Every family scene in the entire house 3 times. This is one of the most emotionally fucked gaming experiences I've ever had. Sif immediately begins to question their motives. There's something evil underneath it. It's good to look at what Act 3 is doing on a larger scale. There's a visceral satisfaction in setup and payoff. Rewarding audience attention is how you earn it, across all storytelling. If you put a coin in the protagonist's pocket, as a random example, and the player can interact with it, it should be an important coin. The game is doing this so frequently it's uncountable. One trick is that X subject is brought up in a room in the house, then made relevant later in dialogue. Issa already knows about body crafting. Sif notices everyone avoids touching him. I wonder what that's about. Mira doesn't understand romance books. That's odd. Odile's prying about Vodgard is kind of weird, isn't it? You can't throw a rock without hitting a dozen instances of foreshadowing. To the extent that if I bring something up, you can assume it was established in Act 2. It's so comprehensive that foreshadowing sounds childish compared to the detailed information flow that's happening. Narratively, we take a series of questions that form a mystery that we then solve. What is Timecraft? Who is the king? How do I break the loops? Why is this happening? This is what Loop and Sif discuss at the start of Act 3. All of this is present throughout Act 2, though it's taken for granted. goal was always to beat the king. Sif looping exists so he can put his fingers in the bastard's eye. It makes sense, but clearly that theory was wrong. The magic is taking all of these narrative threads, binding them into a rope we climb to the end. Answering these questions involves all the little bits of information, giving them relevancy before becoming an answer. All of it begins in Act 2. What is timecraft? We know you shouldn't be able to do it. We know it's a theoretical form of craft that should take too much power to be usable. But we also know the king's gotta be using it. He's freezing people in time. And Sif should be too. They're looping through time. That's their whole deal. It's the broader narrative and focus. While you figure out how to help your allies, you can also ask the king some leading questions to get a few drips of information. Then get the family to read a book in the house about autonomy to get a few more drips. You've already explored every corner of the house, but there's a lot you missed. Miscellaneous rooms aren't holding anything important until you know what you're looking for. We get this unraveling effect. It's enjoyable, but it's half of what's happening. Undercurrent is Sif losing their fucking mind. This is the real narrative. It's just not something that they're willing to talk about, but we watch in real time as they spiral inwards. He takes center stage, using the language of theater to justify sticking to the script. The player is complacent. As time goes on, it's inevitable that you will ignore more and more of the family, and Dormont, and everything else. Repeating the same actions the same way for the same reasons, waiting and watching for all those little changes. Not participating in the world. Those little changes are kind of magic. Sif's internal dialogue is never the same because they're acting and thinking. It creates those little shifts in the floorboards that comprise some of the more engaging elements of the gameplay. Some rooms contain these micro storylines. The floor 1 kitchen has a counter on Sif's blind side, so they smack their hip on it every time and fucking nyah. It starts funny, the 5th time not so much, and stops changing when Sif smacks it back. With Issa and Bonnie feigning beating up the counter, this is a good way to resolve this. The more devastating version is the floor 2 plant room. The hallway's a tight squeeze as everyone tries shuffling through it. At first, Sif notices that everyone avoids touching him, then it bothers him, then he pokes each one on separate loops, and settles with him residing to brush past everyone in place of a hug. Extrapolating this across the entire game, with each interaction having 2 to 3 changes and magic. Everything is the same, but also different. Drags the player into a kind of mania, needing things to change. For better or for worse, this reveals the writing's true priority: moments. We're constantly laying the foundation for moments, scenes and single lines of dialogue purpose-built to fuck up the player as much as possible. Devastation, euphoria, epiphany, that's the point. Everything else is a necessary evil. So when we ask who is the king, there's a few things we know. We know that no one really knows. He just kind of appeared one day and asked to be called the king. We know his motives to preserve Vaugarde and Amber. We know his use of craft is beyond what should be possible. We know he singles out Siffrin and asks, "Do you remember?" That connects to things we know about Sif. Sif remembers very little. Kinda just started talking about the universe like it means something. Stars are important to Sif, but unknown to Issa. We know Sif is foreign, but not where he's from. When we see the king has a star in his chest and he talks about the universe, because he points to Sif, maybe there's a connection there? Maybe it has something to do with that island that just appeared one day. The one that no one can say its name. And we learn that Sif and the king both come from there. Their home, their culture, their childhoods, and God, their country was stolen from them. This series of little moments brings us to the big moment. Sif asks, "Where are you from?" Incredible shit! The king's dialogue hosts some of the strongest poetry, which creates the sheer desperation being expressed. It's the first use of color in a monochrome game, backed up by sound design and gravitas. And really, we've been here for hours. The sheer diligence in getting to this moment is what makes it fucking brilliant. However, this isn't the end of Act 3. The end of Act 3 is a similar moment I don't like very much. The resolution of Bonnie's family scene is a mutual promise to protect each other. It's very sweet and very important to Sif. He already took on the responsibility of protecting them. He already lost an eye for them. Now it's like even more. And after saying its name, Sif offers to stop fighting. They're both from that island. They're one and the same. They need to let go. Except that it's gone. Live here in Vagar today, not eternal yesterday. The king agrees to undo the curse to fucking... It's a trick. He smells witchcraft on you. He grabs Bonnie, partially freezes the rest, and threatens to kill each and every one of them, starting with the child. He gets Sif to fuck off and stop ruining his vibe. It's very player dependent on how much the reader drops their guard. Either way, the scene hinges on violence towards a child being enough to get the audience. It doesn't work for me. It's a kick the dog scene for a fucking monster. Both of these moments are climaxes, but this is the one given weight. The king name drops witchcraft, which will become important. Also, there's the broken promise. Sif's failure to protect Bonnie is treated as genuinely traumatic. It haunts them all the way to the epilogue, and it's just not as good as what happened in the last loop. If you want to see a version of threatening children I do enjoy, the opening of Nine Souls. We know very little about this world and its characters. Foxboy protagonist Yi is living with a human child, Shishan, and this Agrarian tribe. This little shit-eater acts like he does not care about them. You're given the zealotry and fervor of ritual juxtaposed with impossible technology. Yi watches as two humans have their heads ripped off, bodies discarded like trash, with Shishan third in line. Shan? I don't know how to pronounce that. Horrid machine clamps its jaws, and as it lifts his body upward, the tension follows. It's terrifying, because we don't know what's going on, or what Yi is planning, or if Yi cares about him. When Yi blows it up, it creates a bombastic relief just begging you to go play the game. I don't know if one-paragraph distractions are aesthetically pleasing or malpractice. Iset's version just isn't any of this. It's too predictable, it's not violent enough, and it's not creating the visceral fear that Sif is experiencing. Fear isn't the most important takeaway. Witchcraft is. Oh my god, I'm not even halfway done. Stepping into Act 4, you're just given memory of memories. There's a dozen instances of Sif seeing something written and thinking just looking at it gives you a headache. This turns out to be their language. Memory of memories allows you to read their language and gives us the answer to the mystery. Act 4 is simplest overall, but I have most complicated feelings about it. It's the only act where you can do everything. Any side quest or equipment or scene you're missing, now's the time. The game's space is maximized. It's only here you can engage with all of it. But it's also so thoroughly exhausted you'll run out of reasons to. Finally getting to the last 3 nooks and crannies you've been staring at for 20 hours doesn't feel as momentous as it did discovering them in Act 2 and 3. The family has taken a back seat. They've never been less important to the narrative. They have nothing left to say or do. You can't talk to the king anymore. Euphorese sticking to her monologue like it'll get her into Hollywood. Both of you are sick of this. Both of you would like it to end. It's another instance of the game creating a ludonarrative synchronicity. You can check that one off your bingo cards. Player and player character feel the same way about the same things. Act 4 continues the mystery of Act 3. It keeps doing a lot of what made Act 3 great. However, the game's space is exhausted, and the order of events is much stricter. It has less supporting it, the family scenes and the king, and the execution ends up lackluster. You, specifically, have to read the diary on floor 3 behind Cool Door, the floor 1 storage edge room bookshelf, the floor 2 secret library, and Euphorese's notes in her office. From this, Sif thinks to talk to Loop and Euphorese, and that's it. With 8 loops, you can skip around to all of these in half an hour. Of course, the narrative is doing a hell of a lot more with this than the gameplay. I haven't mentioned Loop much, and I'm getting scared of what will happen if I don't. Luckily, this is where they're most important. Loop is shown to know everything, but also not. First they say killing the king would break the loops. When that fails, says they never thought it would work in the first place. Sif doesn't fully trust them after this, and while they keep saying they're here to help, they're dick about it. Loop spends a lot of time trying to prove a point that Sif refuses to listen to. It's not just dying that sends him back. He didn't die when partially frozen by the king, he doesn't die talking to Euphorese. We learn that witchcraft can do anything. It uses rituals to craft wishes into reality. It doesn't mean you get what you want. Turns out, favor trees are a suitable medium for this as long as you have the right rituals. Turns out, Euphorese cataloged how almost everyone in Dormont asked for Vaugarde to be saved. The Vaugarde tradition is to say your wish and then clap like a damn seal. Everybody wished for it, but it had nowhere to go. Sif unwittingly has the rituals. Find a leaf that represents you, ask 3 or 7 or 13 times, breathe it into it, and hand it over to the universe. What did they wish for again? That's what Sif refuses to acknowledge. It's too embarrassing. Clearly, it's everyone else's fault. That's why you're trapped here. You wish for something so small, something so unimportant you could never. Clearly, you just haven't saved it the right way. Sif is just being obstinate and an emotional blockage. They're spinning their wheels and leaping to whatever the most convenient conclusion is. No matter how many times Luke begs them to just acknowledge the obvious, they refuse, deciding that one more time, you just talk to the head housemaiden one more time, maybe it'll work. It doesn't. It never did. It never will. But she does break the script and says new words for the first time since she said words. This is a really good example of how rhetoric functions in writing. Euphorese doesn't say anything new. He's just using more words to explain few words. Using rhetoric compacts meaning, but can lose the detail. And sometimes that's what you need. This brings us to Act 5, the ending sequence. This sequence is damn near perfect. The mystery's been resolved, but Sif hasn't. Sif can't acknowledge that their wish is ultimately why they're still here. Instead, he decides the real mistake is that he hasn't personally gutted the king. Then they decide they need their party to get their shit together and make it easy on him. What follows is a hate crime. Sif uses the demanding omniscience to edit the script on the fly, just get it over with. You can't stop Sif from doing this. He weaponizes everything he knows about them. We're seeing someone at their absolute worst. It's horrible, and I fucking love it. Whenever Sif does some fuck shit, Odile is always the first to cut them off. Sif overhears her arguing to go without them to the house tomorrow. Mistakes. Mistakes? What does that mean? Why did I write that? They take this like an adult, recognizing the harm of their actions and that some apologies are in order, and it's time to, think about why he's doing this. I'm joking. He steals the orbs and charges into the house alone. And this is where the player is given a bit more control back. Up until this point, everything has been on rails. So, of course, you walk forward through the first 2 hallways and take a right to get the first key. The entire house is reorientated. Up is left, down goes right, and right is up, which is down. This is such a profound way of fucking with the player. Your relationship to the house is one of monotony and routine. You know everything about it, and it's very boring. But in that is comfort. It's predictable. It's safe. You can turn your brain off as you mull over the latest story beat. In this case, the last beat was horrible, and now the rug's been ripped from underneath you. It maintains the feeling of disorientation, exhaustion, and stress. It takes away the ability to calm down, even though it takes the same amount of time to get through. We haven't left the emotions from the last moment before we get to the next, being the king. In fact, the final moments of the game are 3 fights with some walking and dialogue. Combat takes a back seat throughout the game, and Sif's kit is unique to this act, so the mechanics are still deprioritized. In fact, the king fight sucks. You spam paper and heal. It's obvious that their wish matters, but in refusing to accept that, they leap to wild conclusions that justify shitty behavior. Again and again, they think that maybe they're doing something wrong, but this is the only thing they can think of, and without something to hold on to, they'd have nothing. What, just lay in a field and lose your fucking mind? At the end of the king fight, Sif's wary mind is brought to a liminal space and meets how do fucking pays. This comes out of absolutely nowhere. It's an immovable reflection of Sifrin. It cannot be hurt. It does nothing but speak. They don't need you. You should have died already. God, you're an idiot. You're not even human. He thinks you're disgusting, They secretly hate you. They hate everything about you. Pathetic, lost, cruel. That's you. That's what you forget. They'll leave and you'll be gone, as it should. You don't deserve them. Sif is being confronted by negative self-belief. These are things he holds as truth in his head. This is what he's fighting to keep. All the player can do is swing, punch, kick, and scream to fucking nonsense. Family shows up. The power of friendship defeats self-hatred. This is one of the greatest moments in gaming. They were concerned about you. They went looking. Luke broke their own rules by telling them where to go. They crawled through that bizarre hell to find you. The king goes to strike, and Mira reflects the attack. It is not established in the magic system. The king freezes, and he remembers his country. He remembers everything. It's not over yet, though. It keeps going for a while. We haven't actually dealt with Sif yet. They're exhausted from his tirade. The walk to Euphrates is familiar. Mira runs ahead, Odil's scared of heights. The sky bleeds. Sif can barely stand. Bonnie offers to hold his hand. She mentions craft sickness. Makes sense, not established. When she finally looks around at the fragmented world, you talk to her, it's all over. Something seems like it's rotting. Rawr, big Sif friend. Please don't laugh, he's very angry. This is the climax of the game. Odil's always the first to react, and Sif takes this as justification. You're forced to make something hurt, them or Sif. This version of the family doesn't know what to do, but they're finally asking. Sif's finally answering. It's Odile and Issa who unravel what's been happening, and Issa just asks. The apotheosis of the game, the thing we've been building to for hours and hours, weeks on months for Sif, is mumbling, "I think you're cool and we should hang out more." The epilogue is pleasant and calm. It's here to tie neat little bows on everything. You can tell your friends about all the fuck shit you got up to, see all the frozen people They live in the house to join the party in Dormont. It's genuinely lovely. It's relief and fondness, humor and sweet, kind little goodies everywhere. Looking back with love and passion, sad to see it go, but excited for the future. I don't have much else to say besides that, but people will yell at me if I don't mention Loop. Sif has been carrying a coin in his pocket the entire time. It's a silver coin, Vagardian currency, nothing special about it. So when you visit the favor tree for the last time, if you jump through some hoops, I thought I did but didn't, you find silver coin, Vagardian currency, nothing special about it. Loop is Sifrin, specifically their Sif from Start Again, which is some wild metatextual shit. I like this, the feeling of power and the relief of letting go fuels you. Here's Loop, a you who didn't get that. You didn't get some neat and tidy ending, some power of friendship bullshit. They threw away their own body to help you. In a very Loop way, they do what Sif did, violently lash out. I like this, don't get me wrong, it's a testament to how far Sif has come and their abilities and emotional maturity. It shows that the pain never just goes away. It's great shit. I just don't care much. I'm not a Loop stan, so despite all of the cool shit it's doing, best fucking song in the game though. The final moments of the game. Holding hands while Euphorese tells a story, seeing the horizon, moving towards it. The script is a lot and I need to keep this to a minimum. Medium is the message and I do want to discuss the gameplay, but I also want to stay sane. The game gets compared to Pathologic quite a bit. That's because people watch the H-Bomb or Mandalore video, haven't played it, and don't understand how miserable Pathologic is to play. The gameplay is boring, ugly, stressful. Reset is tedious and annoying, yet lively and playful. Fast-forwarding dialogue, being able to loop forward with all the keys in hand, the game's not trying to bore or waste time, it's trying to pull you forward by shortening the distance between you and a goal. Dash of Pathologic, yes, but more so Metroidvania or roguelike. You're repeating a lot of content, but the pace at which you move steadily increases. It takes about an hour and a half from start to finish, similar to most modern roguelikes. Goals are proposed by the story, but how they are accomplished is up to the player. Memorizing the house is compulsory, doing so allows the player to route from a starting point to points of interest to their goal. From Dormont to floor 2, visit the plant room, head to the dead end in floor 3 for story, loop back to Dormont. The time cost is how much walking it takes to complete a given floor, but running through the entire house is usually unnecessary. Despite being intentionally tedious, it respects your time as a person. It's not waiting in traffic, it's testing you. If you want to experiment with an interactable, you have to earn it. I think this is an important distinction that succeeds where games like Pathologic fails. Walking for an actual hour is 30 to 40 minutes too long. The 20 to 30 ISAT demands is reasonable. It's justifiable, but still creates a similar emotional experience. Fast forwarding is the real magic. Most players will dedicate more time reading than playing. In text-heavy games, spamming A while looking at a second monitor is a massively unfun time sink, but holding the run button auto-plays the text at an increased speed. It keeps everything snappy and moving at the player's pace. You're constantly learning new information, repeating old actions. Every story beat has these breaths between them. You're meditating, mulling over every little detail, forcing you to pay attention and rewarding your attentiveness. Because so much of this is player-driven, you're often the one stumbling into minute intricacies that evolve from minor details into core parts of the narrative. We learn that Sif ran away from home and doesn't know where they got their cloak, before we understand what happened to Star Country. I don't think I mentioned that it's called Star Country in this entire thing. It's why this story, despite being a book in length, cannot exist outside of its chosen medium. The interactivity of games carries with it an inherent power that Adrian wields to greater results than most could dream. While there's nothing special about pressing an interact key on interactable and getting an interaction, when that spirals into an entire hidden quest, ending in thematically meaningful emotional resolutions, magic. That's the key of games, flipping over a rock and finding a dungeon, reading a book and finding depression. The game is made in RPG Maker, yet the engine feels the same regardless of what's built in it. Movement itself is kind of bland and awkward, but well-crafted sprites and good animations help out a lot. There's about as many plugins as there are total credits. What has been accomplished is impressive. Part of that is owed to Isabella Ava, who is to thank for fast forwarding. It crashes maybe once every 50 to 80 hours. The game is clearly running on duct tape and dreams. Gordon is a mini-boss with 7 targets, 4 types of resistances, and the game struggles. This is more of an acknowledgement. Every engine has its limits, it doesn't feel held back nor improved, more cooperating. Where the gameplay truly excels is its combat system. Really, it's just this fucking bar that ticks up to a character's turn. It solves the turn order problem, it makes speed a meaningful stat, it conveys scaling, it carries a constant tension with it. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The combat system could be expanded to something world-spanning and outclass the majority of AAA games. It's just a great premise. Replace mana with cooldowns, make all the buffs team buffs, passing turns, simplifying weakness and resistance, jackpot. Items are still kind of worthless, and basic attacks struggle to remain relevant in the late game, but it's still a great premise. The scope of the game is too small to flesh it out. There's one difficult fight, and the game makes a point when it becomes easy. A lot of my praise is similar to that of Dream Tactics, this mix of simplifying the tropes and then expanding and complicating that base layer. Difference is, iSet doesn't have the space to give you build redefining items. The closest it gets is the paper mache gloves for Issa, changing his basic attack from rock to paper. The king is rock, and Issa's only option to stack something other than rock. So yeah, it's an equip it and forget it kind of item. I've spilled enough blood over this. Ironically, I think the combat is actually so fun and later satisfying that it draws too much focus on itself. It's supposed to bore, annoy, frustrate, but it's engaging when you're learning it, and by the time you're sick of it, Sif has so thoroughly outscaled every enemy, and you're given just attack. Like, it's ridiculously strong and sick as hell. How am I not supposed to love using this? I made some points about the gameplay, but I'll leave it to somebody else to drive themselves insane writing a novella and turning it into a video. And instead, I want to point out some miscellaneous things and do some actual critique. The music is made entirely by Studio Thumpy Puppy. You've been listening to them the entire time. Like the game, title theme and Dormont present as RPG.wav, before subtly shifting into an evolution of those aesthetics. Still not one for music words, but fucking good is my opinion on this OST. Not only have I put it in every video I've made with music, like I've listened to it on my own time. How Can I Help You, Stardust? Being remixed and juxtaposed with How Can You Help Me, Stardust? Is all 3 versions of It's Over seamlessly blurring into each other on every approach of Euphorese. It's well made and well used. It's on par with the Danganronpa OST, the highest possible praise. While it's easy to see the excellent portraits, the sheer additive nature of these. Writing doesn't need help, but they still bring more to the table. They look great and often contrast or reinforce the emotion of the words. From Act 3 onward, we see more and more of Sif's portraits are replaced with fake _1 through 5. Having 5 fakes shows the attention to detail. Some of these are nearly identical with minor shifts in posture or expression, but the game can bounce between individual lines of dialogue, thus holding attention to itself and adding to that dialogue. It's texturing the text. In Act 5, we see portraits of Issa where his face drops and his eyes darken. It's a side of this character that we never see until his crush threatens and insults him. The greatest compliment and condemnation for the game is the same thing. Moments. The goal of the writing is to shock and surprise. In case you've blacked out for the last 50 minutes, it's pretty good at that. However, there's 2 inescapable consequences for this. Failing to earn these moments can massively undercut the surrounding narrative. As I pointed out in the ending sequence, there's 2 uses of craft that are not established. The reflection spell isn't stretching the internal logic too much, but Odile stopping Sif from looping is... Ow. Everything we've established over 20 hours shows timecraft is only possible through witchcraft. Otherwise, timecraft is best theoretical and largely regarded as nonsense. How did Odile, a version of her that knows nothing about witchcraft, stop it? How can it be stopped? Has it anything to do with Mira's unfreezing spell? Itself highly conditional and not very useful, which is why I didn't mention until now. Now, these aren't actually that bad. They're dramatically appropriate and the vast majority of players aren't going to scrutinize these. They'll just clap their hands because it's fucking awesome. If you do, the magic system makes a little bit less sense. Mal Dupé's, however, is a fucking sin. I see this as the real antagonist. It's the manifestation of Sifrin's ills. It's the self-hatred that keeps her from asking the family to hang out more. It is the thing in between them and the resolution of the narrative. But there's nothing that leads into or out of this one fucking Z. Like I said, Bonnie getting yoinked didn't work for me. I've heard people praise this, either way. What that means is that player, doesn't feel the way the narrative needs me to. This is meant to be dramatic and has drastic ramifications for Sif, so it's brought up a lot. But every time it's brought up, I feel, I'm constantly reminded that I don't give a shit. It's very mystery box, and when this style works, it fucking works. But when it doesn't, you leave the audience annoyed, disappointed, and disconnected from the artistic experience. It reduces the writing down to a hit rate. What ratio of moments do and don't work? Risa has an 80-20 to 90-10 hit rate. That's better than the guy who coined it. The other problem is a sacrificing of coherency. Texts have beliefs and argue for them through the use of narrative. The Owl House argues against conformity. Again, called the Conformatorium. ISAT believes a lot of things and has good reason. Fuck if you can figure out what they are. The game has a thesis statement. You just have to do a family run, backtrack to the one statue you're not supposed to backtrack to, in the next loop look at a bunch of them, then go back to that one intact one. Then you can talk to God. This is an excellent scene. It's awesome that you can do this. It's incredible to discover on your own. It's a definitive conclusion for Mira's character arc. The Change God themselves is pro-ace. After that, they away Mira and talk to Sif. Through their little sponsor, they damn this frozen hell. They curse this unchanging, repeating, static purgatory you've created for their people. Death and destruction would be preferred. Even demise demands change. But in this, how will you change? That's what the story's about. It's about the way Sifrin needs to change in the face of nothing that can. Then that's what we see happen. They're changed to be just a little bit more open and vulnerable and honest for the sake of those they love. So why is it here? 80% of players didn't see this. One of the most important scenes regarding Sifrin's touch sensitivity? 80% didn't see it. One of the coolest side quests in gaming? 87%. If you put a coin in the protagonist's pocket and only 21% of players know why it's important, then this is more complicated than just bad Lamau. Games tend to lose a lot of their audience over the course of its runtime just because they're really long. Games are interactive, making players solve elaborate and odd puzzles to get cool things they want is awesome. These scenes are really the game at its best, but burying some of the most pivotal and important sentiments in the corner under a rock is infuriating. It throws away the guarantee that players will understand what you're trying to tell them. At Touch, for example, Sif gets frustrated with Issa's tendency to pull back. It's not a secret how these two feel about each other. Issa won't. Sif realizes that they need to be the one to do it and just grabs the motherfucker, give him a big old kiss on the lips. Issa, obviously, is surprised someone's surprised to kiss him. The way Sif reacts is so fundamental to his character. He panics, causing a loop because he doesn't feel like he can go on like this. Thinks, disgusting, disgusting, disgusting. Loop mocks him for this. Maldupe says the same thing. Mechanically and narratively, the way Sif holds this belief, it's trauma. It's ingrained into him for reasons they don't understand, and he hates it, but it affects his behavior. The loops happen because he believes he's not worth keeping around. Maldupe just says all of his trauma beliefs. They don't need you, they don't even like you. What do we see Bonnie doing? This is my fault. Adil, Mira, Issa, they relate to Sif through discussing trauma. The resolution comes when Sifrin acts against those trauma beliefs. King's motives come from him being stuck in trauma, too afraid to lose everything again. That's what the game's about. But because I'm the one saying it in a video I've made, I've thoroughly stacked the deck. There's so much shit in this game. I can't talk about everything, so I'm only talking about the things that make my argument for me. And I don't even agree that works need coherency. I don't think it has to be whatever makes me happy. I don't even want that. It wouldn't be an incredible experience so many people had if it was what I'm saying it should be. Maybe I'm asking the wrong question? Oh my god. I hate you so fucking much. Ah! It's the best for getting. I didn't fix any of the issues with Audacity, so it's still gonna have the same shit problems. It's like 10 a.m., so I'm gonna drink coffee this time. actually really good. It's just pure fucking liquor. There's so much booze. Writing this segment has been my own time loop. I throw down 1 to 2,000 words, I come back, and then I read it, and then I trash it, and then I throw down 1 to 2,000 words, and there's a few reasons for that. Adrian jokingly demands a 2-hour essay type deal in one interview. Hi, that's me, bitch. They name drop MatPat and H-Bomb, which is convenient starting point. You probably know who those two are. MatPat's practice of theory crafting is in no way comparable to H-Bomb's practice of critique and feminist theory. Those two are radically different ways of approaching a text. Theory crafting is materialist and literalist. It tends to disregard analysis of quality and experience. It treats text as whole within their own context. It permisses the surrounding microculture to canonize whatever the community agrees should be. Wherein critique proposes a value hierarchy created from the critic's experience of every text. Each new text is then juxtaposed with. While feminist theory recognizes that creatives and text exist within society, and society is patriarchal and white supremacist and queerphobic, so it analyzes the presentation of those things. Obviously, I'm on the H-Bomb side of things. In my myriad pretensions, I propose myself as a critic, the only one with the righteous opinion to say what is good and bad. I gaze at the symbol to extract its meaning. Demanding the formless to take shape. My glasses queer the lens because I am gay. What is revealed across the author's postmortem is which one they wanted more. Adrian and interviewers do not talk about what I think the game is about, trauma. They do not discuss textual presentation of mental illness and reconciliation of trauma, despite that being what the story is. Zier explicitly sees the game as given to the audience. We're more excited to spur fandom and allow for interpretation and theory crafting. That's what she wants the legacy to be, and that intention influences the work. There's so much shit in this game. So many one-off things and bizarre idiosyncrasies and disruptions to otherwise excellent characterization and world building, because that's what they wanted to make. And it's actually good because of those things. Art is neither strictly objective nor subjective. It's a complicated mixture of both that brews in thinking minds and feeling bodies. It's what it's in discourse is simply discourse. But when the author pursues the subjective practice of audience perpetuating the work, it so thoroughly disrupts the ability to be objective, I don't know what to do about it. As I come to understand more and more of this, my opinion changes. I thought about it and I like it less. My praise and enjoyment has mild every time I open my mouth. As I have inspected each mystery box, my disappointment grows. I could prattle listless forevermore, but I think I've wasted enough time. This is me being me. If it wasn't me, maybe this would be easier. Everything is always the most difficult it could possibly be. I don't know why that is. In this 4-month journey of obsessing nearly every day, I finally figured out the most basic shit. So laid back and cool. It's a mirror, polished and clean, reflection without recognition. They stared, I stared, neither saw nor blinked. It was obvious from the start. Kinda knew the whole time. But this is me we're talking about. The reason why this game emotionally slaughtered me a year and change ago is Cyprin's amnesia. It represents something I've experienced all my life, but nobody had ever seen. The first decade of my life is gone. From what pieces I've recovered and what I'm willing to tell the internet, family moved out of my home state. Some bad things happened. We moved back. That child is gone. There's an epoch I'm aware of. Everything before is blacked out. It's this vague sense that something exists. Everything after is murky and tangential, a loose acknowledgement of association between things, no sense of time, place, reason, reaching for stones and muddy waters. Forgetting conversations, needing to be reminded how to do a skill you developed, feeling detached and unsure of anything, never knowing if it's real or a dream, or if anything is. Friends and family and yourself are amorphous and melting blobs of concepts. Do I have retro and interrograde amnesia? Maybe just all of the symptoms. Does Cyprin, was that the intention behind their character? I don't really care. Even now I reject the urge to theorize. What matters is that pain being viscerally realized. Made real, seen, understood, released. Art exists to explain nuance, and I may never say it better. I don't feel like people understand me when I say I don't remember, and I have to say it all the time. I don't remember. Sif does. Sif knows what I mean. They don't either, and that's okay. Writing this has been my own time loop. I can't pretend like it was that fun being tipsy at like 11 o'clock in the morning. It's even earlier now, so I'm just gonna be normal and drink coffee. Can never quite say what I need to the way I need to. It's been 5 months. I started this almost immediately after Dream Tactics released, and it's been 5 months. My opinion on ISAT has changed because I've been thinking about it for 5 months. My understanding of what this project is has changed a lot. Every time this happens, and it always does because it's how this works, I feel like an idiot. My takeaway from ISAT is that it's a story about the process of process that is trauma work. However, when Bazir talks about it in interviews, it's not what they say. You can feel the blues circulating its way through my system. If I say it's about something, I'm saying that. The text wants me to speak for it. That's where my conclusions about the queerness comes from. I see something that accepts the trans and gay but excludes the ace. I see condemnation of real-world queer spaces. I see condemnation of real-world queer spaces and the disaster. I see a condemnation of real-world queer spaces and the disaster of respectability politics. When bees are fine, xenogenders are mocked. Bi people just need to pick a side. How can you be asexual if it used word sexual? That kind of moronic, self-defeating nonsense. My problem is that I don't want to speak for the text. I want to listen to what the text is telling me. I'm ultimately less interested in theory crafting. It's just arguing headcanon. I don't care. Writing this, I get stuck going in circles. My main coping mechanism is hyper-intellectualizing literally everything as an extension of disassociation, combined with the isolation and the proclivity to be paralyzed and avoidant in the face of stress whenever I can't think my way out of. If I go in circles, I lose the plot. I end so wound up over something that's completely disassociated from whatever causes stress that I become completely non-functional. And I've done that like 3 times in the last couple of months. This person I've been very fucking nice to me. I am so close to being done. I just want to be done. Really, the mistake I made was the entire idea. Reset is just one of those. It's an incredibly difficult work to It's an incredibly difficult text to unwork by design. If I started over, maybe I could, but I'm not doing that. I need to move on. I'm done. If the plan is to say everything, it's not worth it. Say nothing. They're about the same. I can't say everything. That was a stupid idea. If this wasn't so coincidentally personal to me, I wouldn't like it. I don't know what to do about it. My self-perception of stoic thinky type doesn't allow for that. I'm the one who needs to change at the end of it. I don't know in what ways right now, or how and when right now, but right now, I can feel it. The way we shed pieces of ourselves, letting go of yesterday's pains and desires, always in these little moments of silence. There's no drama in death. Only ever in retrospect can life ever suit a narrative. If the chapter's missing, all the words misspelled. I don't have a point to make. I don't have epic romance, explosive action. I can't save anyone. I can't save myself. I won't pretend like this is worth your attention. I won't cry over that. I can't, I won't try to say anything more than, this was really important to me. Can I share it with you?